What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the Hustle Muscle podcast. I am your host, Kristen, and I am the muscle, and Chris is my co-host, and he is the
hustle.
The hustle.
I put the hustle in the Hustle Muscle podcast.
Yes, that is exactly right. So this is our third episode being back. We are on it right now.
Yeah, back from surgery, 3 episodes being filmed right now.
Yeah, and this one is pretty cool because we got a comment from Jared.
On the first episode, on the We're Back episode.
Yeah,
that one he commented and said, can you talk a little bit about why you left the police force, like why you stopped being a cop? Mm-hmm. And I've kind of touched on it a little bit in other episodes. I've touched about it on my channel. I don't know if we've talked about it in your channel. And we've talked about different aspects of it. So maybe we'll just kind of get back into that. So I guess we'll just maybe kind of start a little bit from the beginning and kind of get into why I quit being a cop.
So Chris was born in New Jersey.
This all started back on a sunny Thursday.
So like you want to start back when you started in law enforcement? Or
yeah, so basically I think, well, it's weird because we moved to Myrtle Beach 4 years ago during COVID.
Yeah.
That was 2020. I officially stopped working in 2015 and retired in 2017.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. It always feels like last year. Like it's always one of those things where I'm like, oh, I used to be a cop and I retired like a year ago.
Like a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
Now it's almost 10 years.
I retired this long ago. It's like one of those like things you mark on your wall.
Right. It's almost 10 inches.
That's what she said.
That's the size queen, guys. If you must know.
So it's been quite a few years since I worked as a cop, and since we moved to Myrtle Beach in 2020 during COVID, it's funny, we have like all new friends, obviously, because we lived in a whole new place, and there's people that we've been friends with for a couple of years now that it's almost like they didn't know I was a cop, or it's like I assume people know that because everybody in New Jersey knew that. Like you get, being a cop is like one of those careers that you get like identified by your position.
Yeah.
So like, if you go out to dinner with some people or something, somebody wants to introduce you, they'll be like, this has happened since when I first started working, but they would always be like, oh, this is my friend Chris. He's a cop. And it's like one of those things that like, maybe in the very beginning I thought it was kind of cool. Like it was like a chip on your shoulder when I was like 22 years old. But then it's like, it kind of gets old and it's like awkward. And
you hated it.
Yeah.
After a while.
Yeah, pretty quickly I like actually really hated it because like you don't introduce everybody like that. Like you don't say like, hey, this is Tom. He's a head custodian. Or this is Lou.
He's a principal.
Yeah. I just feel like there's certain professions that you really almost like don't. Like maybe like a doctor is another one that you might introduce somebody and be like, oh, he's a doctor. Or, he's a surgeon. Like there's certain people, I guess. And it's hard because you don't want to be mad at the person that does that because they're just proud of you and your profession.
Right.
But it's like awkward and like it makes conversations awkward and people are like, oh, that's cool. Like, tell me about your typical day. And, it's like these things happen at work that like you really don't tell other people because it's not fun to talk about. Like everybody thinks that being a cop is fun, or they want to tell you every story about like, oh, well, I got pulled over by one of your friends. I'd get that all the time from people. I get it from family all the time. I have family in like Pennsylvania, and I worked in New Jersey. And they're like, oh yeah, I met one of your buddies. I was like, one of my buddies? Who'd you meet? And they're like, I don't know who he was, but one of the cops here. I was like, we're 2 hours away. I don't know anybody around here. Like I've never met anybody here. They're like, yeah, one of your friends gave me a ticket. I was speeding. I was like, you were speeding? They were like, yeah, I was doing 20 over. He gave me a ticket for doing 9 over. But
you should call your friends and tell them not to do that.
And they spoke to me very degradingly. They were very mean. And I was like, so you were speeding? And then they saw you and then they wrote you a ticket for speeding? Like, oh, no. But anyway, yeah, so being a cop was like one of those professions that people would always introduce you as. And I just didn't love it. And some people never could get the hint of it, that I didn't like it, even if I told them that. But it is what it is. So anyway, yeah, in that career, I mean, I think it's a lot like, say, being, say like a vet, a doctor, first responder, firefighter. There's like a lot of professions where you deal with like death a lot, and even like I said, vet, but I mean like with animals, like your day at work, like everybody's like, oh, you're a vet, that's cute. Like you probably like, you can see all these cute little dogs all day. And it's like really like you're probably like putting a lot of dogs to sleep. You're watching dogs that get hit by a car. They come in really quickly by like loved ones. And you know what I mean? Like you're dealing with like trauma. So when you go home, somebody's like, "Oh my God, that's so cool! You're a vet. It must be so much fun." And you're like, in your head, you're just like
Just
all
wanna
these like
start
horrible
crying.
images going through your, and then it happens like a doctor. Like being a doctor is probably cool, but there's probably a lot of doctors that deal with like death all the time. Like you're trying to fix somebody, you've been working for hours trying to keep somebody alive, and then they die, and you're like, oh God, now I got to figure out what I want to do for lunch. So you like quickly have to like kind of
Compartmentalize? Is it compartmentalize?
yeah, that's one term for it. Yeah, you have to kind of like, there's times where we leave like, being a cop, you leave like a dead body, and then where you're standing over a dead body.
It's like
people
pizza
are like,
or Chinese.
yeah, people are like, we doing pizza or Chinese for lunch? I'm like, Jesus, like he's not even cold yet. But then you're like, yeah, we'll do pizza.
Or like you'd come home and tell me what happened during the day, and it's like I'm crying, and he's like, well, what did you make for dinner? And I'm like, how are you okay right now? Like something's not right in your head, but he doesn't have a choice.
Yeah, it does screw you up mentally, but people don't really prepare you for that. And that's going to kind of get into the story a little bit too. But I've had friends that retired early; they just stopped working. And a friend of mine basically was like, "I've had enough. I'm done. Here's my badge, my gun, everything." Like mentally, and I was a member of a SWAT team, and I was a sniper. So like we've done things that are not just typically like pulling people over and giving them speeding tickets. Typically, we're going to places where maybe somebody's held hostage or somebody is wanted for a murder or whatever the case is. So we deal with a lot of bad people, or we go into very low income houses. So you can imagine when you're like, you're doing a search warrant on somebody that's wanted for either a horrible crime or they possess guns.
Or drugs.
Yeah, I mean, and we only really dealt with people that sold drugs and had guns. So like if somebody just sold drugs, like the SWAT team really wouldn't handle that. That'd be like detectives. But we'd be going into these houses where it was like kids, it would be freezing cold in their house because they wouldn't even put the heat on. Kids would be sleeping in all their clothes, like sweats and jackets, and they'd be laying like on the floor, or they'd be laying on a pile of their clothes. While there's also like a bunch of like dogs in the room that are just going to the bathroom everywhere. So like, you go into this room where they don't even have a bed. They're sleeping with shoes and socks on because they're so cold. And you just see all these horrible things. And it's just like, over time you just get numb to it. But to normal people that don't see that every day, this would be a very tragic situation for them. So your idea of what's normal and tragic really starts to kind of like go off to the side a lot. So your normal is not regular people's normals. But so anyway, kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent. I had a little dry mouth here too, but yeah. So before we get to the retirement, any good stories? It's always hard. People do that all the time. Like, you should do a podcast about police work and tell all funny stories. And I'm like, that's really great. And I'm like
how many of these stories are actually funny though?
Right. And then I start to think about like a funny story. I know millions of them. I'm like, no, like can't tell that. Like that's not really funny. Like my funny is not regular people's funny. It's more of like, somebody getting hit by a train and their body parts are going everywhere. Like, can't tell that. That's actually not funny. But like you just in your mind are so messed up that you don't even know it. And in a weird way, you almost don't remember the funny stuff. Like I remember the good times. Like I remember getting coffee and just like talking with other cops, like having fun, like relaxing type stuff. But it's almost like you forget about all the funny things.
Remember falling asleep at Wawa?
Yeah. Yeah. That was a good one. I worked nights, and so I would be done. I'd work nights. It was like midnight till 8 a.m. So at like 5 o'clock, you're exhausted. 5 in the morning. 6 o'clock is a struggle because now the sun's coming up. Everybody's going to work. So like everybody's speeding, and you pull somebody over. Everybody's miserable because they're like, I'm trying to get to work. You're like, I know, but you're going too fast. So I remember I was like struggling hard at like maybe like 5 in the morning.
It was still dark out.
Yeah. I went to Wawa. And like I pulled up, and I didn't even know what I wanted. I was like, maybe I'll get coffee. I was kind of hungry. I was like, maybe I'll get food. And so I remember I opened my and I was the only. It was like I had to be like maybe 5 in the morning because nobody's there. So I'm the only car in the parking lot, right in the center of Wawa. And I pull in. I open my door, and I remember I stuck my leg out and put it on the ground. So I had like one leg in the car, one leg out. And I was like, what am I gonna get? And I was sitting there thinking like, I don't know if I'm hungry. Maybe I'm just gonna get coffee. And I was just relaxed, and I like blinked my eyes and opened them, and it was like
broad daylight, cars everywhere, people walking by. Like it was like a light switch just went. It was like quickly like the light turned on, and I was like, oh my God. And I looked, and there's people like they were all ignoring me, like nobody was paying attention to me. And I don't remember if I had like my head back. I probably didn't have sunglasses on because it was night when I fell asleep. But it wasn't like I meant to fall asleep. It must have just. You were that tired.
Yeah, you get delirious.
But an hour went by, and it was broad daylight from being pitch black.
And there was not a person around. And all of a sudden, I like just blinked my eyes and opened them, and there was people everywhere. And I just put my foot back in and shut the door. And I was like, I'm leaving. And I just backed out. And I was like, we got to get out of here. I didn't even know what time it was. And it was probably only like I fell asleep for like 30 minutes, but it was probably at that time where the sun
switch.
just started to come up and people started going to work. And it was just, yeah, I remember that as one of those like, oh my God, I was so
That was
embarrassed.
actually really funny.
And when you're a cop too, especially when you work nights, it's funny because like say like you might have supervisors or chiefs who work day shift. And if they find out you fell asleep at work, it's like, most departments, they get really mad, especially if you fall asleep in the public. Like some people take it as a big deal. Some supervisors don't. The supervisors that have worked nights most of their career understand it. And I worked nights pretty much my whole career, and I loved it. But they'd be like, you can never fall asleep. It's like one of the deadly sins, you know, like never fall asleep. You're a terrible person if you do. But you can't help it sometimes. Like if it's 5, 6 in the morning or if it's still dark and you might just stop for a split second and like blink your eyes and just nod off. Like you just can't help it. It's not like you're like getting a pillow and getting blankets and tucking yourself in
Right,
and you
you
get
didn't go
caught
home.
like putting yourself to bed. Okay, I can see that's a problem. But sometimes you might pull over to like run radar or just sit in the woods and see if you could maybe get a car stop in the middle of the night. And you just sit for a split second and you just get kind of comfortable, especially if it's cold outside and you have the heat on in your car. Get nice and toasty in there and you just might nod off real quick. But some people get so mad about that. And it's not the safest thing to do as a cop, but it is what it is. Sometimes you just fall asleep. But
Yeah, so let's get into the story a little bit.
So in 2015, so I worked in one police department for most of my career in New Jersey. And for that department, I ended up getting onto a county SWAT team, and I was on there for a long time. I got on there almost in the very beginning of my career, which usually does not happen. My department only allocated 2 people to be on SWAT. And when I first got into that department, there was already 2 people on that, that took that position. And they were young cops. So it's one of those things where like, if young guys get on SWAT, like you're pretty screwed. Like they're not going to come off anytime soon unless something bad happens. But anyway, these 2 guys both ended up leaving the department and going to other departments. And so 2 spots opened. They were vacant for a little bit, and then they put a friend of mine onto the team. But you had to try out. I don't say they put you on. You have to go through
A lot
of work to get on the team. And you're talking about like physical tests, your interviews. You have to go through a psychological test, which is a nightmare in itself. Shooting tests. I don't know if I said that.
Trainings, though, like the training.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff, and then you have to then you get like on for like a trial period where they kind of like see how you actually do, because you might do well in an interview. And
basically
then
go through the academy all over again.
Oh yeah, then we did. Yeah, you had to go through SWAT school. Yeah. And then when you get out, you're on the team for a while. But there's probably your first year on there. You're on like probation. Like if you're horrible on the team, they can just boot you out. If you can't click with the people, if you can't get the concepts, they'll just send you back to your apartment.
Well, it's a team. It's definitely like SWAT is like a team sport. You guys all got to get along, and it's all got to operate smoothly. You can't like not like your partner and leave him out there.
And you also almost can't be like a very like a liberal thinker in a way. And I'm not talking about just politics when I say that, but you can't be timid or one of those people who's like, yeah, but technically you're going to get taken in the locker room and get punched in the mouth for stuff like that. But you have to be willing to act and be decisive, and you can't hesitate or pause. And you have to be willing to go down with your ship or fight with your team. There can't be any, and you could weed those people out pretty quickly. But so anyway, I got on a SWAT team. I was on there for almost my whole career. And like I said, I got on at a very young age. I was very well liked in my department by.
You had to have been on there for 10 years.
Yeah, and then an opportunity came up, and I left my department for another department, which was a little bit closer to home and paid a lot more money. And I had also been promoted to a sergeant in my first department. So I was on SWAT. That means I have a take-home car. I'm given a whole bunch of cool guns and stuff. I'm given a lot of I'm given more leeway and like less supervision. And then, like I said, then I got promoted. So now I was running a shift, and
you were a sniper as well.
Yeah, and then I moved from the SWAT team. I stayed on the SWAT team, but also now I'm doing more duties as a sniper. And sometimes I would go training we would do just sniper training.
You would run the shooting range and stuff too. You know, like a lot of that stuff going on.
So my career, it progressed, and I did a lot of really cool things. But then an opportunity opened for a guy that used to work in that department. He left and went to a new department. He ended up getting promoted, and then we remained friends through things like Call of Duty, and there's a funny story. So this kid that I'm now talking about, he was like, "Hey, you have Call of Duty. Why don't we play Call of Duty together?"
That's Chris, right?
Yeah, Yeah, Chris. And so he was like, hey, there's a bunch of people from my work. And, like you can, this was, I don't even know what year this was. Maybe like 2000,
It had to be like
2012,
2012,
yeah, 2010, 2012, when like Call of Duty was out. And so we had like the headsets and stuff. And I would play with basically like all these guys from another department.
That you didn't know.
And I didn't know any of them, but we played like every day together. So I kind of knew them, or I knew their little like gamer tags and stuff. So sometimes it would be their names, like their last name or something. And so then we kind of phased out playing video games for a while. And then that same friend was like, hey, we're hiring in our department. If you're interested, get me a resume together, as quick as you can. And so I think I had it to him by like the next day. And I got hired. Like they were trying to hire somebody like ASAP, as fast as they could. It was almost like,
it didn't seem real.
yeah, the hiring process in which I got hired, I mean, that's almost a funny story in itself because it was so secretly done. I got interviewed.
Can we talk about that?
Are they going to fire me?
It was like, I was like, this isn't real. Like somebody's pulling a fast one on you. Like you're going to get in trouble at work.
Yeah, so a friend of mine was like, get me a resume as quick as you can. So I literally got the resume, and these were civil service departments in New Jersey. And in some civil service departments, what you can do is, it's called a lateral transfer. You can basically, if both chiefs of police agree on it, you can go from Department A to Department B, and both chiefs sign off on that lateral transfer, and you just lateral over, and now you're a cop in that town. And for years, my original chief refused to do it because everybody was leaving. Every good cop would lateral to a better town. And so my chief was like, wait a minute, I don't have to actually sign off on these? Like, he's like, I'm not doing it anymore. He's like, I'm losing all my good cops, and I'm hiring everybody. And so that was his way to squash people leaving. And so it was one of those things where you just couldn't lateral to another department. I could retake the civil service test in another town, try to get hired. I could. There's other ways you could have done it, but it's very hard to do it that way, to start all over. So we got a new chief in, and so I went to that chief when I knew this process was going to happen, and I was like, hey, man, I was becoming his best buddy as fast as I could. I was like, hey, we have these things called lateral transfers, and he's like, what's that? And I was like, basically, if, say, one department wants to hire you, if you agree to it, I can leave and go to that department. And he's like, okay. And he's like, well, like, why would I not do that? And I was like, there's really no reason you'd want to not do it unless you just don't want to help me succeed or maybe make more money. And he's like, well,
Chris is so good on his toes,
he's like,
too.
well, could I? And I was like, here's another thing you could think about if you allow lateral transfers is you can lateral people into this department. And he's like, I could? And I was like, yeah, because he was like a state trooper that got hired politically as a chief for our department. He didn't come up the ranks in our department, and that's just the way it was in my first police department. So he really didn't know how civil service worked at all. So I was like, yeah, I said, chiefs do it all the time. It's common practice. He's like, oh yeah, of course. If you had a better opportunity, I would let you take it. And I was like, oh my God. So I was like, perfect. I was like, stay right here, don't move. So then I ran back to the other department, and I said, I gave my resume, and I was like, let's go, come on. And so like that later that day, a lieutenant called me from this new town and was like, hey, can you come in for an interview? And like it was like
12 hours later.
Yeah,
not
like,
even.
can you come in like now? And I was like, I'm working right now. And I was a sergeant on the shift, and we were on minimums. So that means I can't take off. Like we're down to the bare minimum we were allowed to work. So I was like, I honestly, I can't leave work right now. We don't have enough people working. So I can't leave and go see you. And this is like a 30-minute drive away. And he's like, could I come to you and interview you at work? And I was like, no, God,
I was
no.
like, don't do it. This is a trap.
Because again, I told my chief, but not my supervisors who I have to actually work with on a daily basis. I couldn't let them know I was trying to leave, or it starts to really kind of ruin relationships. So I was like, no, you can't come here and interview me. I'm at work. Like, nobody could see this. He's like, well, what if we just go meet in the woods somewhere? I was like, okay. I like where your head's at. So I just met this guy basically in a parking lot.
What was her name?
No, it was a man. She sounds hideous. So I met this lieutenant in a parking lot. I was like, let's just go meet in a parking lot somewhere. And we sat down, and pretty much we're just both like pulled up door to door, got out of the car. We're both like leaning on bumpers, just sitting there, like a very casual conversation. It was very like not formal. And in police work, interviews are very formal. Everything is done very formal, and like, he's a higher rank than I am. So like, it should have happened very different, but we just clicked right off the bat, and we talked like we were like best friends. So he explained to me what they were looking to do, what they were looking to hire. We talked quickly about like pay, like what I could come in at pay wise. I told him where I was at now, how much I could
afford to take a
Yeah,
cut.
how much I could drop down because now I have to kind of start over because now I'm a low guy and I have to work my way up. But the jumps were much, much bigger and I would top out at a lot higher salary. So I was like, okay, like, listen, I'm willing to do this. He said, okay, let me go back and talk to my chief and then explain to him that I met with you and then we'll kind of go from there. So I'm guessing things went well with that. He went back, talked to the chief. The next day, the chief was like, come in and pick up. He's like, come in and speak with me. So I went in the next day. It was like 2 days later from when all this started. This happened over like a 3-day period. So then on day 2, he's like, hey, come in and see me. So I go in to see the chief. The chief was talking to me. He's like, hey, he's like, how well do you know this town? This was a huge, massive municipality. He's like, how well do you know this town? And I was like, I don't want to say I know it like the back of my hand, but I'm extremely familiar with this town.
Bullshit artist.
This was my first time in that town. I had
It was
GPS.
like the southernmost point of Ocean County. Like,
I had like
you don't drive
GPS
down
how
there.
to get to the police department. Like I didn't even know I was in the right building. So I was like, I know the town well. Listen, I've lived in, down the street and a couple other towns away. I was like, I've lived here my whole life. I said, I know the area. He's like, all right, good. He's like, here's a background application. You've got to fill this out like tomorrow and then get it back to me like the next day. So, and I think this was like in the evening when I met with him. So he's like, tomorrow, fill out this whole background and get it to me if you can the same day or the next day. And he's like, because on like Thursday is our town meeting. And I would like, if your background goes well, I would like to push you to be hired at our meeting, which is coming up in like 2 days. So I was like, oh my God. So police background checks, the paperwork, it's like 60 pages.
Stack.
It's
and
a
you had to
huge
go
thing.
to like the local police department or something. Wasn't there like a lot of like places?
Well, there was a thing that happened the next day.
Yes.
So I'm like, okay, I have to go to like my high school and get all my transcripts. I have to get my college transcripts. I have to get all like past employers. I have to get names of everybody, phone numbers. There's so much to do and it's extremely hard. So like 7 a.m, I go to drop my daughter off at daycare, come back home. I'm like, okay, I have everything I need to do. I'm gonna go hit all these errands. I'm driving down my main road in my brand new truck that I just bought. And so I stop and I'm behind a car that's turning. And this guy behind me is doing like 60 and just doesn't stop. And I like look in my rearview mirror, hear him lock up his brakes. He smashes into me. I smash into the car in front of that. That car goes flying. And I think, I went to the hospital, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was bad. It was actually a bad accident.
So I go to the hospital.
That's what messed your back up too.
Yeah. So that's why I have a really bad back. But anyway, so I go to the hospital and I'm in there. I'm like, God, like time is ticking. I'm like, all right, we got to go. Like, get me some painkillers. Let's go. I got to go. So I get out of there middle of the day. Now I'm like, I got to get all this paperwork done. So I go and I get it all done. And, I leave the hospital, I'm running around. I get everything I need, everything filled out. And I called the chief. I said, I'll be there in the morning to drop everything off to you. And this was on like a Wednesday, or this was Tuesday going into Wednesday. So I was like, I'll be there Wednesday morning. So I go in and see him again. And I could barely walk because now like it's day 2 and the pain kicks in. So I'm like, he's like, oh, his like office is on like, I swear it felt like it was like the 18th floor and they didn't have an elevator. It was actually on the 2nd floor and they did have an elevator, but we walked up one flight of stairs and it took me forever. And he's like, you okay? And I was like, oh, I'm good. He's like, you're like walking really slow and you kind of have a limp. And then I was like, well, I was in a really bad car accident yesterday, and but I still got everything done. So I explained what happened and he was like, holy shit, I can't believe you did everything even after being in the hospital. I was like, I got it all done. Here you go. Like, that's how bad I want this job. And so we interviewed again. Like, again, it was very casual. And I hate saying that because if people are watching this that work there, that went through like the regular process, they're going to be like, So again, we're getting off topic, but I'm going to hurry this up. So the next day, it's Thursday. So he's like, hey, there's a township meeting. We would like to ask for permission from the town, like the mayor and the councilman, to approve your salary so we can hire another person because they were like down a guy. So I was like, okay. He's like, come to the meeting. I think he just said, yeah, he was like, just come to the meeting and we're going to.
Me and Kylie had to go too.
Yeah, he's like, you can bring your family. He's like, let's just go to the meeting.
Show face.
Yeah, and he's like, you get to meet everybody. He's like, I want you to meet the council people. I want you to meet the mayor. So I was like, okay. And because you're trying to win over the town so they can say, yes, we'll fund his salary and we'll let you hire another cop. So I go to the town and I thought that, they were just basically going to like get that part approved. Like, I didn't know what I was doing at this meeting. And then all of a sudden they were like, they approved it, but then they like swore me in.
He got hired on the spot.
Like, I got hired right then and there. And then some woman like snapped a picture and I left at like 8 o'clock at night. It was like an evening meeting. 8 o'clock, I leave, and it was posted on Facebook. Like, congratulations
We were like
to our new
walking
hire.
out with our jaw like dropped. Like, what just happened?
Yeah, I didn't even tell my work about this. So then one of my lieutenants texts me while I'm driving home. I didn't know it was on Facebook, and she's like, like, what the hell? So I was like, what's the matter? And she's like, you got hired in Little Egg? I was like, how did you know? Like, it just happened. And she's like, it's on Facebook. And I was like, oh crap. So then I had to do damage control. And so because I was in a car accident, I had to put in my 2 weeks notice, and I put in 2 weeks of sick time. I was like, I was in a car accident. I'm not coming back to work.
It was so bad.
So yeah. So anyway, so that's how I got hired. So I was hired. It started on like a Sunday, and I was hired by Thursday, which was incredible. So now I work in this new department. I got hired in 2014, right? Yeah, summer of 2014. So the reason I quit that department wasn't because I really wanted to. It was because I was involved in a shooting in 2015.
Yes.
Right. So November 2015. I was involved in a shooting. It was with me and two. I'm trying not to get into too many details, but it was me and two other cops, and which is fine. I mean, I'm allowed to talk about it, but I hate talking about it when there's other people involved in it. But anyway, so it was me, two other cops. We're checking the welfare of an individual, and again, I think I've done videos describing this whole scenario. I think so possibly on this podcast, but so we go in to check on the well-being, and there's a man there with like a butcher knife, and he ended up, attacking us, coming after us, well, he didn't physically attack us. Like, the knife never went in anybody, but he tried to stab the three of us or what. He came flying at us with a butcher knife, wanted to kill somebody. So it didn't work out well for him, because I think they say, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. So it didn't, he lost that day. And so what happened was, after the shooting, immediately you get put out of work, and you're put on administrative leave. You still get your paycheck, but they take you out of work, and then they figure out like what's happening, because basically you just killed somebody. So they need to figure out like, was it self-defense? Did you act maliciously? Did you do anything wrong? Did you not follow policy? Do you need to go to jail for murder? Like, all that kind of stuff. So that happens, and I immediately leave work, and that was literally the last day I shaved my face.
Yeah,
so that's how
literally.
this whole gloriousness has happened. Was I had to shave every day since college, because I did security jobs leading up to being a cop. So I always shaved every single day, and I didn't even know I can grow a beard until the day of my shooting. I was like, I'm just not going to shave. And I was like,
It was growing in nice and thick. So.
Yeah, whenever I would take time off of work, say I would put in like 3 weeks of vacation, I would just not shave because it was fun. You shave every day. So for 3 weeks, I'd be like, I'm not going to shave. And it would start growing back in. And then you shave, go back to work. So I was like, I'm just not going to shave. But now things are coming up, since I'm out of work, where I had to go for like depositions. I had to go meet with attorneys. I had to go to court, all kinds of things. And so every time I went, you go in like a suit. Like, you don't wear your uniform. And one of our policies at work was, if you're in uniform, you had to be clean shaven. You had to shave your face. So I was like, well, I'm technically not in uniform. I'm in a suit. So I was like, I don't think I have to shave. And at this point now, my beard's starting to grow, like past just facial hair. It's like
we have a beard.
I have a little mini beard going on. So I was like, I don't want to shave. I haven't shaved in like a month now. And at one point I had to go in and meet with my chief in my department. And I was like talking to the other two guys who were out of work. I was like, should I shave? Do I need to shave? Like, and I was texting people that I worked with. I'm like, what do you guys think? Do I need to shave or not? And they were like, no. They're like, don't shave. I was like, yeah, true. I was like, what are they going to do? I'm already not working at this point. So I went in, and when I saw my supervisors, they were like, oh my God, your beard's so cool. They're like, we're so happy that we got to see this and you didn't shave. So I was like, oh, thank God. So that's kind of the story of how the beard started.
Yeah.
And so for 2 years, this whole thing's in limbo. You're waiting to find out what's going to happen. And then finally they approved my retirement in 2017.
Yeah.
And
that was interesting too. They were, your attorney was like, shave the beard.
Oh yeah, my attorney, he was always like, yeah. The day that my shooting happened, he was like, you can't talk to anybody. I was like, okay. He's like, you can't talk to your wife, can't talk to your family members about what happened. He's like, that's the lawyer's job. It's like, don't talk to anybody because you're going to mess something up. So I was like, okay. He's like, you could talk to a priest. And I was like, no, I don't talk to priests. He's like, I'm going to get a priest to call you. I was like, don't get a priest to call me. I was like, listen, I don't go to church. I don't do the priest thing. I don't want to talk to a priest. He's like, talking to a priest is like one of the safe people you could talk to, because they can't interrogate a priest. They can't, there's like a confidentiality that's there, kind of like with a lawyer. And a priest never has to tell the things that you tell them. At least that's what I was told. Who knows? I mean, maybe if you tell a priest that you murdered somebody and they didn't find the body yet, maybe the priest has a due diligence to tell somebody. I don't know. But anyway, some priest called me, left me a voicemail. I was like, "Hi, I'm a priest. Call me back." I didn't call him back. And so what else?
So you're retired.
Yeah, so I had to go to see a psychiatrist, all kinds of stuff for every day, once a week for 2 years. And then it lasted even past the 2 years. But they have to make that determination. Doctors, I saw multiple psychiatrists, and some would be like one was like, say, my psychiatrist. And then I ended up hiring my own psychiatrist on the side to talk with. So I had 2 different psychiatrists I was talking to. And then the state would send me to a psychiatrist randomly to evaluate whether or not that there was a necessity, a medical necessity for me to see my first psych, who was paid for, I think, by the state. And then when you're going through the retirement part, then the state sends you to another psychiatrist. And then it was a lot of different people you had to talk to. But basically, the psychiatrists are the ones who determine whether or not you're going to go back to work or not. And so they have to sign off and say that whether or not you're a liability, whether or not you're mentally ready to go back to work, whatever the case is. And I think, especially within New Jersey, it's a lot easier for a doctor to sign off and just say, like, we're going to give him his retirement and he's not going to go back to work, because it's a lot safer for the doctor also, because now the doctor has no worries. If a doctor says he's good to go, put him back, give him his gun back, and then you go back to work, and either you're maybe like a little overreactive and you're scared of everything now, and now you're shooting, killing everybody, or maybe you're too afraid to get into those situations, so you freeze. So maybe like something bad happens and you freeze and can't protect yourself, can't protect like the people that you work with or innocent people. And then it might come back on that doctor about, well, how did you say he was okay to work when he clearly wasn't? So I think it's a lot easier for a doctor to just say, like, hey, why don't you go find a new job? So that's basically what happened at 33 years old was, like, they're like, hey, go, like, you don't have to be a cop anymore. And I was like, okay, what do I do? They're like, anything else? I was like what? They're like, anything. Like, you go back to school. I was like, I'm not going back to school. I'm 33 years old. I already paid for college. I'm still paying for college. I was like, you want me to take out more student loans while I'm stressed out as it is? And he's like, yeah, maybe school's not a good idea for you. But he's like, you could do anything.
But he had a criminal justice degree to fall back on. So not
idea.
entirely helpful.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm like looking up like jobs at SeaWorld. I'm like, maybe I'll be a dolphin trainer. Maybe I start a dog walking business. I'm like, what do I do now? So
go to Home Depot.
Yeah. So it kind of full circles around. So now we're going back to the dinner conversations. When you go out to dinner, now like it get awkward because people are like, oh, this is Chris. And they're like, oh shit, what was I supposed to say? He used to be a cop. And then it gets awkward, so now it's like you're kind of like this whole new identity because, you're known by who you are and your identity. And now it's like, well,
who am I?
Yeah. What do I do now? I used to be like Chris, the cop. Now I'm just Chris. And I'm like, oh, this is awkward. So ultimately I didn't leave, like by my decision. Like I was kind of, forced to leave, I guess is, when you say forced to leave, it sounds like a bad thing. So it wasn't necessarily a bad thing.
You really didn't have the ultimate decision-making skills.
Yeah.
The psychiatrist had the decision-making skills. So you weren't forced out. You just weren't given an option to stay.
Yeah. And when you're out of work too, it's like hard because you're it's like almost like you're on sick leave. Like as if you get hurt at work and you tear your rotator cuff and you have to go out of work and you're sitting at home and you're like, well, I can't really go outside and play volleyball because I have a bad shoulder. Or if maybe you're like kind of like milking it or not really injured, and you're like, I really can't be caught riding jet skis because I'm out on shoulder injury.
But this is different.
Yeah, and so this is like a mental issue, and so like I kept staying indoors. Like I was afraid to go outside and do something because I was like, I didn't want to do anything like that was fun because I felt weird about it. Like I was like, well, what if I go outside and like people see me smiling? They're gonna be like, oh, he's happy, he can go back to work. It's like this weird thing where you just feel like you should not be going to work or you should not be having fun. And so we had like a boat, I think at the time.
Yeah, we did.
And, my doctor's like, go on your boat. And I was like, am I allowed to? And he's like, yeah. He's like, you go on the boat, go have fun. Like do things that bring joy to your life. And I was like, well, what if like somebody sees me on the boat? They're like, you're allowed to go on the boat. Like you're not out on a back injury, riding around, jumping waves. And I'm like,
please stop ordering stuff on Amazon.
Oh, the amount of mulch and
You're
plants
no longer
I bought
working
for
overtime.
my property. I was outside like raking leaves every day, mulching. I didn't know what else to do. But I was spending a lot of money on landscape and on the house.
Yeah.
I was like, I was just sitting in the house like, oh, we need to fix that. We need to get some new windows in here. And I just kept spending money. I was like, I gotta do something. So anyway, that's why I quit being a cop, and
So it's not really a quitting. It was you had to stop cold turkey
yeah,
being a cop.
yeah, withdrawals were crazy, but yeah. So that's pretty much it. So it happened back in 2017. Well, 2015.
Yeah, 15 is when you stopped actually walking through the door as a cop.
Yeah, and so 2017 it was like official, and everything was finalized and done. Paperwork was done, and I was officially like left the department. So by 2017, when I was officially done, I already had like a beard at that point. 'Cause it's been like 2 years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I hate when people say like, "Oh, we're going to make him shave it." And like, "No, I love it."
who knows what I look like under here if
I
I
don't
shave this? I
know.
might have like fat double chin or something at this point. I don't even know.
Well, you're very handsome, but I don't know if the
Well, that goes without saying. I'm very handsome.
but I don't know about like the clean shaven face with the mohawk. I think that would be like a weird look. I like the beard and the mohawk. I think it's you. It's your personality now. You're one with the beard.
I want it to go white now. I mean, it's going.
No, I'm not
quick.
ready
Look
for
at
this.
thing. It's like it's coming in white hard.
We're gonna have to get some more hair dye. I won't let it go.
You're getting old. It's terrible.
Yeah, it's rough. But yeah, that's a story about after policehood or when policehood ended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, again, so that was just answering one of the comments on one of the other videos. So if you guys come up with something that you want us to talk about, remember it has to be somewhat appropriate for YouTube.
Yes.
Comment down below. Let me know if you have questions for her, for me, for both of us. Let us know what it is, and we'll try to answer it on the next time we sit down and film.
Yeah.
But that's it. So on to the next episode.
All right. Well,
Peace
we will
out,
see you
everybody.
guys next time.